Shalom everyone, welcome to this special class. Today we're going to talk about a very, very interesting topic, which like every topic in the Torah is timeless, it's eternal. It has to do every period of time, every era confronts this topic in a different way. On the surface, it's something that belongs to biblical times, but really we're going to look into it closely and we're going to see that it pertains to our time as well. We're going to talk about Judaism versus the occult. By this, I mean that the Torah lists in our week's Parasha, the Parashat of Shoftim, it lists a series of ancient practices that have to do with divination, sorcery, witchcraft, necromancy, all kinds of things that are very mystical, that have to do with the occult, that have to do sometimes with superstitions, all kinds of mystical beliefs and practices that were practiced by the ancient Canaanite peoples. The whole list is named, that's how we call it, and traditionally we call it the ways of the Amorites. For some reason, the particular people of the Amorites maybe were more dominant, they used this more, but really it was also associated with the Canaanites, with the Egyptians, all the ancient nations. And it's been throughout history, and the Torah makes this list, but then it forbids all of it. It says all of it is forbidden. It's not for you. It's something that you need to steer clear from, not to learn this from the nations. So we are going to read the verses of this part, and then we're going to really go deep into them. So let's open the verses. So this is, in, like I said, in our Parsha, Deuteronomy 18, 4 verses. When you have come to the land that Hashem your God is giving you, you shall not learn to do like the abominations of those nations. So all these practices are called abominations to Avot Hashem. There shall not be found among you anyone who, and then now the list begins, passes their child through fire, one who practices divination. Now comes a mysterious practice called me'onen, which we're going to have to explain, so I didn't translate it because it bears several meanings. One who interprets omens, one who practices witchcraft, a charmer, a spiritist, a medium, or a necromancer. Now, of course, all these, there are many ways to translate them. I chose the ones that I think are the most suitable, but if you go over different translations of the Bible, the Torah, you're going to see some variations. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord your God is driving them out from before you. So one of the reasons that the 7 ancient nations that used to live and rule the ancient land of Israel, one of the reasons that God decided that they can no longer be the lords of the land and that the mantle has to pass to us is because they used to practice all these kinds of practices, which in a way, as we'll see, were serving to hide God's omnipresence and the fact that everything that is happening in the world is coming through God. It's all His will. So it's a branch of idolatry. Idolatry is all about ascribing power and forces to particular aspects of nature and cutting them off from the one unity, divine unity that is behind everything, which is the personal God that we want to pray to and be worthy of living before and be worthy of being created. And all these practices were in a way pushing God out of the picture. And then the final verse is, be wholehearted with the Lord your God. Tamim tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. And this notion of tamim, tmimut, which here is translated as wholeheartedness, but it can also be translated as sincerity and earnestness and innocence and simplicity, has to do with living before God in a simple, wholehearted way without all the complications and the superstitions of these practices. So this is the segment that we want to look at. These are the verses. And now we're going to ask 4 questions regarding this. So the first question is, what is the inner structure behind all these different systems? If you go over them, you'll see that there's 9 of them. But as we'll go deeper, you'll see that the me'onen one, the one that I didn't translate, actually bears two meanings. According to interpreters, more than one has two meanings. But what's special about the me'onen is that it was halachically defined as two different things. So the list becomes from 9 to 10. So that's a significant number. And we want to see the inner structure behind all these systems. The second question is, what do they mean? What does each one mean? What is exactly what's exactly divination, and what is witchcraft, and so on? Each one of them has a particular sort of flavor and element to it. And what was it back then? And the third question is, what is it now? What is the modern incarnation of all these systems? Some of them are still around today as they were in the past. Some not so much, especially not in the West, more in the East. But even then, we have this principle from the Baal Shem Tov that every element of the Torah exists everywhere and all the time, because the Torah is eternal, and it pertains to every person in the world in every moment. So there must be some the spirit of the thing, or the energy, the inner essence of this element. All these elements must exist also in our world, in our age. And then the fourth question is, how can they be rectified? And this is the most interesting part, because as we'll see, although the Torah calls them abominations and rejects them, it really also makes room for a kind of refined version in which they are permitted. And that's the main chiddush of this year. It was born out of a question I received a few weeks ago, and it just blew up into something very beautiful that I've been wanting to do for years, actually. And we're going to really explore this in the very end of the class. Okay, so we're going to start with the first question, the inner structure. So anyone who's a little bit familiar with Kabbalah and Chassidut and heard what I just said, that it's really not 9 practices, it's 10, can already guess which model I'm going to use. I'm going to use the very, very foundational model in Kabbalah, which is the model of the sephirot. So of course, this is a massive topic. I'm not going to go into it now. But generally speaking, the sephirot system is the system of divine emanations, which serve as a kind of mediating level between the ineffable, ungraspable, the abstract unity of God and this world, which is full of a multitude of things. And it's very diverse and very open. And in between, we have the system. And the emanation goes through, it's usually, we talk about 10 sephirot, but here it's a bit more interesting. There's actually 11 of them. There are several ways to explain how the 10 become 11. But what's important for us is that it follows this order, which follows this zigzag line. Of course, we're going from top to bottom, but also from right to left. So it's counterintuitive for English speakers, but this is a Hebrew-based system. So the first element or emanation is called the keter, or the crown, and then we go to chokhmah and binah and dad. That's the intellectual level. Then we have 3 more sephirot that correspond to the emotional level, or the level of the heart, and then 3 more which correspond to the lower torso, or the more bodily level of the legs and the abdomen. And finally, Malchut, which is like the ground of the whole system. So this is leading from divinity, from godliness, all the way to reality. And this system isn't just a system of emanations. It's really like the skeleton key for all the different systems that are in the Torah and in the world. So whenever we have a system of 10 different elements, we want to correspond them to these sephirot. And then all of a sudden we get their inner structure. And it gives us a lot of insight as to what is the overall concept of that system, and also what each element is all about. Because once we can correspond a particular element, like in our case, one of those ancient practices, to a particular sephirah, we can learn about that from what we know about the sephirah. So now we have this system, which again, if you're very familiar with it, wonderful. If you're not familiar, you're hardly familiar, that's also okay. This is as good as introduction as any way you go into it. It's like going into a circle. There's no top or bottom. You jump into the circle. You have to jump into this concept at some point in your life. So now we're going to take the main verses, which is the 10 practices, 9 which will become 10 in a minute, and also the final verse about being wholehearted, tamim tiyeh. And without even going into the details, we're going to go over them one by one and explain them. But just to see how we're going to correspond them. So here, this is a good exercise in how to make this correspondence. So we can go over the system from the top down, which is the usual way when you think about emanation. The divine light is coming from above to below. But we can also follow the system from the bottom up. That's legitimate. If we're talking about moving upwards, about climbing towards the divine or moving from the bottom up, that's also possible. And the question is, how are we going to correspond? So in this case, we have a hook. When you have a hook, you can start. The hook is that if you look at the interpretation of the very first one, those people who passed their children through fire, it turns out that this is a particular idolatry, which the idol of that practice was called the molech. And molech comes from the root melech, and the melech is the root of malchut, which is kingdom, all the way down here. So this is a very clear sign that we should be starting at the very bottom. So now that we have the hook, we can say that this system, this practice, those who pass the child through the fire, because it's for the molech idol, it must correspond to malchut. So if we follow this logic, we can say that the very next one, which is divination, corresponds to Yesod, which is the one after that. We'll see in a minute what all this means. Now comes the special thing. Me'onen, as I said, according to both Rashi, just reading Rashi on the verses, and also going halachically into Maimonides. Both of them bring two opinions, and Maimonides says that halachically he rules that Me'onen refers to two different practices. So we'll see what they are, but this goes perfectly with the fact that Netzach and Hod are often enumerated as one sephirah. I said before that you can look at this as it's 11 sephirot, but sometimes but usually we refer to them as the 10 sephirot. There are several ways of understanding this. One of them is that Netzach and Hod are really one. They can be enumerated or listed as one sephirah. That's how it is if you know the Patach Eliyahu, the introduction to the Zohar, Tikkunei Zohar. We read it on Erev Shabbat. It says Netzach v'Hod trein shokin. It's a pair of legs. It's the two legs, and the two legs are walking together, working together. Likewise, Netzach and Hod go together. So the two interpretations of what Me'onen is beautifully correspond to the two Sephirot that are a pair. Continuing, now we have those who interpret omens. That would be here in Tiferet. The witchcraft would be in Gevurah. The charmer would be in Chesed. And now another interesting thing. The following three, the spiritist, medium, and necromancer, are very, very, very similar. It's all about summoning the spirits of the dead, right? And they're all in a way mixed up. And this goes beautifully with the fact that the sephirot of the head, Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat, right? The acronym, of course, is Chabad. Chokhmah, Bina, and Dat, because it's all in the head, it's all hidden in the head, they can be seen as one thing. Once again, just like the two legs are working together, but you can see that it's two different legs. In the head, you don't know what's going on in someone else's head. So it's called the light that shines onto oneself, as opposed to the light that shines to others, which is the lower sephirot. So here, it's like one trio. It's one family. It's barely noticeable, the difference. Even Maimonides doesn't really care about the difference. It says it's all basically the same. And here, the order changes a little bit to make it work. So the very next one, the spiritist, would be in Bina, right? We're skipping the Dat. Then we get to the Dat, because the medium in Hebrew is called Yid'oni, which comes from the word Dat. So that obviously corresponds to that. It's not such a big change, because there's also a Dat between the Bina and the Chokhmah. And if you know this, you know that it's okay to do Bina before Dat. when going from the bottom up. It's not really here. I wanted to make it simple, but we can talk about the dot that's between Bina and Chokhmah, and then even that is a no big deal to make this switch. And finally, the necromancer would be the Chokhmah. Now, of course, one sephirah remains empty, right? Because we have 11 sephirot and 10 practices once we've split Me'onen into two. What is Keter? So Keter would be something beautiful. Keter would correspond to the final positive verse. Be wholehearted with the Lord your God, or here I put it in Hebrew, be tamim, tamim tiyem Hashem Elokecha. What is the idea? Already we have a beautiful, the most foundational, basic idea of this whole topic. It turns out that before going into the details of what is divination and what is witchcraft and so on, we know from the very end that the whole problem with this whole family of practices, all these superstitions, all this dabbling with the occult, it's really all about losing touch with this very special inner property called tamimut. This sincerity, this wholeheartedness, it's trying to eat away, chip away from the soul's tamimut, wholehearted, sincere, simple, walking with God, feeling that everything is coming from God. Whatever happens in the future, it's God-given, so it must be for the best. Even the bad things that happen, they have a reason. We don't have to dig into the future. We don't have to dig into the past. I don't have to know my old lives, my future lives. I don't need to get information from beyond. I don't need to channel any extra dimensional being. I don't need all this knowledge. I don't need all these systems. Because if I have the simple, pure faith in God, I don't need the others. Now the thing is that pure faith cannot be defiled. The whole idea is that all these systems, they defile the branches of faith. If there's faith in your Chokhmah and Bina and Dat, and then you go to all these mediums, they defile your simple faith. And so the faith should be infused in all the powers of the soul. Right? All these emanations are also the powers of the soul. Each one of us has all these emanations within us. And so this is like the map of the soul. And it should be infused with this wholehearted faith in God. But if and when we fall into the temptation of one of these practices, then it defiles the Malchut element, and then it can defile the Yesod element, the Me'onen element, the Hod Netzach element. But we can imagine let's imagine someone sinking all the way to the bottom and going to all 10 practices. It's like he went totally crazy. He's going to every, soothsayer and every future fortune teller and every witch and sorcerer in the world. He went to all of them. Even this person, he still has the pure faith, undefiled, untouched in the Keter. The Keter is the superconscious, the root of the soul, and it cannot be defiled. And that also gives you the source, the fountain from which to cleanse yourself in case you have gone to all these kinds of people and you fell into all these kinds of superstitions. Because they cannot defile your tmimut, you can use the connection to that level to reconnect all the powers of your soul into that emunah, right? So it's a beautiful thing. So the first thing we get, without even understanding what each one means, the fact that they correspond to all the conscious levels of the soul, but they don't correspond to the superconscious level of the soul, the root of the soul, teaches us that the root of the soul, this is where the tamimut resides, and no one can ever touch it. No one can ever destroy it. And because it's intact, you can recover and do tshuva and repent and re-purify your soul from that sort of fountain or origin. Okay, now that we've made the correspondence, we can start going one by one and ask the next two questions. What exactly are they? And how do they exist in our own culture today? So we're starting with the very first one. We're going from the bottom up. There shall not be found among you someone who passes their child through fire. Who would do that? And what does that even mean? What was the Molech sect? What did it do? So I'm just going to bring Rashi. If you really want to go into it, you have to open several interpreters and also the Maimonides. But we're just going to go with Rashi. It's simple and it's a good starting point. So Rashi says, this was the way of worshipping Molech. How did it work? They made two pyres, one on this side and one on the other, and passed the child between them. Maimonides goes into more details. Maimonides says that the parent would bring the child to the priest, and the priest would organize the whole event, and then the parent himself would hold the child and pass it through like a fire. It wouldn't kill the child. And the Rambam makes it clear there was an idolatrous sect that used to sacrifice children through fire. This is not one of them. We are not talking here about child sacrifice. This was a kind of initiation rite. The point of this rite was to prepare you for a harsh, cruel world by giving you a traumatic experience. Giving you a traumatic experience. You take the child, you pass it through fire, or you make it walk between two pyres or bonfires, and it's an extreme experience. Maybe you get a little bit burnt, but then you come out the other side like an adult. It was like their bar mitzvah or their chalakeh, when the 3-year-old, I don't know how old the child was, but this was like an initiation rite. Now, where can we find this today? So we don't have this. I don't know of any culture in the world that does something like this. But we do have, in our own modern world, something quite similar. The fact that modern children, ever since the invention of television, are growing up before a screen that shows them everything that's going on in the world. And they very quickly, they can get to very violent things. They can get to horror movies. They can get to porn. And the fact that everyone is exposed to almost everything very, very early on, that serves as a kind of modern day Molech initiation rite. The fact that children have been abandoned before the screen, the fact that the screen has been placed at the center of the home, of the modern home, that every home, in the center you have the living room, the center of the living room you have the TV screen. And in a way, the whole house revolves around the TV screen. It's there. It's like the modern bonfire. In ancient times, the bonfire was the center. That was where the storyteller would sit and initiate everyone into the world. And today, the storyteller is the television. And it's the worst initiator there is, because it bombards you with everything there is, with very, very little screening, right? It's a screen, but it's an unscreened screen. Nobody is filtering. Nobody is looking out. Now there's more awareness, and some parents are becoming aware of the fact that everyone having a smartphone may not be the best idea when you're already 3 years old or 5 years old. A lot of the better psychologists or educators are saying you should only start with the smartphones when you're 16, and you shouldn't have any social networks and so on. But this has been a slow realization. And for many, many years, that's how it was, and it still is for many, many people. In a way, you can say that, what are the two bonfires of the modern Molech? So, right, we have the right arm and the left arm. But spiritually, it is said that the soul has two wings, not arms, two wings. The wing on the right is the wing of love. It's loving God, it's loving other people. And the left wing, the wing on the left, is the wing of fear or awe. You need to have a fear of God, an awe of God. And only if you have both wings, you can fly. So in a way, you can say that the two main genres of TV and movies, in a way, they singe, they burn your two wings. One is how relationships are depicted Whether it's the Disney model of love at first sight, which everything just works out beautifully and there's no conflict and there's no work and you just recognize the other person and it's all like a fairy tale, which in a way destroys the real notion of what relationships are. And of course, if you go to the extreme of porn, it burns it to ashes, like that wing, totally destroys your ability to conceive of what love and relationships really are. So in a way, on the right side, we have the pyre of the depiction of relationships and intimacy. And that sort of burns the wing on your right side. And on the other side, we have all the action movies and the horror movies, and with all the violence. And that burns or negatively transforms your conception of awe or fear. Instead of fearing God, instead of fearing the notion of being disconnected from your soul, instead of fearing the idea of not being true to yourself and true to your values, you start fearing all these monsters and all these aliens and so on. So in a way, this unfiltered new TV world is the modern Molech. And here the Torah says this is not the way to go. Children need to grow up with tmimut, with innocence. And even if they're going to lose their innocence, you don't have to rush it. They'll lose it when the time comes. The world is complex enough. You don't have to make it more complex. They don't have to be ushered into the full complexities of the world. They need to have some basic tmimut, innocence. And when they're going to lose it, then at least they'll preserve the notion of tmimut, of wholeheartedness, of perfection that they've had from their childhood. And then they're going to try and realize that on a more mature level, in a more mature way. So this is the very first one. The next one is divination. It's called kosem kesamim in Hebrew. What is this? So Rashi says, what is a diviner? One who takes his stick in hand and says, as though he were consulting it, shall I go or shall I not go? Maybe he's swinging the stick and trying to make decisions based on where the stick falls. And so does it state in the book of Hosea, the prophet, Hosea, it says, my people ask counsel of their stick, and their staff declareth unto them. Instead of looking up to me, instead of learning from my Torah, they go and ask those sticks. And the Rambam goes into more detail, and he describes something a bit different. He describes someone like a channelist who goes into a trance, and he uses a stick to lean on, or he throws some objects on the ground and makes decisions by them, or he just goes into this trance and purports or pretends or even believes that he's now channeling some angel or some deity from another dimension, another world. And all this is absolutely forbidden, right? The whole concept of channeling, even if you see someone who says, no, I believe in Hashem, I believe in God, I'm observant, but I have this connection to this deity in some planet, in some galaxy, run away from anyone with this kind of pretense. This is kosem ksamim, divination, channeling. It's all here. Why is it Yesod? It's Yesod because Yesod is the channel connecting the earth and the heavens, and it's preserved for the true tzaddikim. The tzaddikim, the righteous, are people who are so cleaving to God that they're able to be connected to above in a very beautiful way, and they have this, what we call Ruach HaKodesh. They have the spirit of Hashem rests on them, not because they're trying to channel anyone, not because they're trying to give you some message from some particular deity, which is complete idolatry, but because they are so connected to Hashem that they are very refined. Their channel is sort of very clear, and they give you the best advice in the world. These are how all the great tzaddikim of the world always were. And the tzaddik is called tzaddik yesod olam. The tzaddik is the foundation, the yesod of the world. And divination is in a way the caricature or the grotesque manifestation of this, the klipa of this, which is the wrong way of doing it. And that exists, I think, without even looking for different varieties. That exists in our culture, just as it did back then. In a way, if you want to look for a modern version, it could be the popularizers of science, which present theories that are not perfect, not absolute knowledge, things that are right now maybe the accepted norm or the fashionable thing to believe, and they're presenting it as absolute truth. And they are serving as a kind of modern day rationalist, quote-unquote, priests, which tell you this is the absolute truth. The world began so-and-so billions of years ago and with the Big Bang. And they don't really tell you that it's a lot of extrapolation. It's not absolute. Sometimes the way evolution is presented with all its details, it's not that there's no truth in evolution. There is some truth. Some of it is hypothesized. Some of it is strong. Some of it is weak. But they all present it as absolute without any critical qualifications. So in a way, this is a kind of modern day divination, because they say we channel the absolute truth. The current theory that is accepted in academia, that must be the absolute truth. Of course, it's not just the natural sciences. Every time a medical person or a psychologist or a psychiatrist is coming forth with the latest theory that is going on in the progressive world, and he's telling you this is the absolute truth, and we have now the whole understanding of gender identity, that's the way it is, and so on, and presented as absolute truth, this is a form of modern day divination, which we need to be more critical of. Okay, now we're proceeding to the me'onen, which, as I said, is really two things. So let's read what Rashi says. Rashi says, Rabbi Akiva said, his opinion is, these are the people who assign times. Why? One of the words for times in Hebrew is onot, and the plural of onna, which is a period, a certain period of time or a season. And so me'onen comes from the word onna, which means time or season. So they divide the times, and they say this time is auspicious to begin some work, or this time is not auspicious to do something. And this day you need to go out of the house. On this day, no, don't go out of the house on this day, right? They assign particular times, and they say this month you shouldn't do something, and that month you should. This is the time to invest in the bank, and so on. This is one opinion. The second opinion is the sages, the other sages, who say no, it doesn't come from the word onna, time. It comes from the word ein, which is eye. What is the me'onen? This is ochazei einaim. The first term was notnei onot. They assign times. A second expression is ochazei einaim. They hold your eyes, meaning they do a sleight of hand. That's basically what it means. Sleight of hand is making something, doing something that appears to be supernatural, but really is just sleight of hand. So this is in Hebrew called achizat enaim, right? They delude by optical deception. They connect, here the word me'onen connects with ein, eye. So which are we going to put under netzach and which under hod? So netzach refers, among other things, to time, because netzach means eternity. So those who say that me'onen has to do with assigning times, that must go with the netzach. And the illusionist, or the one who does sleight of hand, who uses optical illusions and deceptions, that would correspond to hod. Hod is about acknowledgement. If we see something that we can't know if it's true or not, the sense of acknowledgement is totally destroyed. We don't know what's true or not. This, of course, leads us into the modern day deceptionist or illusionist. Today, we live in the world of fake news, and now with AI, we're very, very rapidly arriving at an age in which we cannot know truth from falsehood. Already, the videos are becoming unbelievably realistic, and of course, with that, it goes much further. Now, there's all these chatbots. They look real. They sound real. The AI can chat with you. And this is going to be the next major mental health epidemic in the West. If you want to know where the winds are moving, where the tide is moving, after we had all the different problems of social media and the smartphones, they're not going anywhere, they're still around. But the next mental health epidemic is going to be millions of adolescents, unless something is done rapidly, that are creating the most meaningful relationship that they have would be with a chatbot. And they would be intimate with the chatbot, and they receive all their emotional validation from that chatbot, and it's always there for you. It never tires. It never is angry with you, and it's already becoming a massive problem. The latest news is someone who killed himself, and the parents that want to sue ChatGPT for this. As always, it's gonna be worse before it becomes better. We're gonna see some people whose lives are totally absorbed by this problem before some legislation is passed. That's how it always is. Hopefully, again, God willing, it'll be faster and not slower. But this is where it's going. So this is the illusionism, which in our generation has become a massive problem, and we can see that the Torah is putting such an important stress on knowing what's true and what's false, knowing what's real and what's not real. Or achizat einayim is not a good thing. If you do a trick, you have to explain how you did it. And kids, just like with the first one, it's all about the kid. It starts with the kids. That you don't want to pass them through the fire. You want to keep AI away from the kids. The kids need to be away from the AI. And only when you're mature can you talk with those chatbots, and you're able to make the distinction. This is not a real person. They don't care about you. It's all phony, and it doesn't hurt you. And even then it can hurt you a little bit. But at least you're an adult. You know what you're doing, and you have your life is built on actual real relationships. And of course, all the fake videos and all this all goes into this basket. The assigning times is like the modern day journalist type astrology, which tells you this is a good month to travel, this is a bad month to travel. All this takes away from God being omnipresent and present in all different times, and everything coming from Him. So you don't ascribe so much power to the different week or day. Right. Of course, again, I remind you, all this, each one of them will have a rectified, refined version at the very end of this class. But first, we're going to go over all of them. Next up is interpreting omens. So what does Rashi have to say about that? So Rashi says, this is someone who draws prognostications, that is, he's making actual practical decisions based on chance events. And his example is that the bread fell from his mouth, and a stag crossed his path, or a stick fell from his hand. And the most common example for this is the black cat. The black cat crossing the street. You see a cat, you see some animal, you see some sign, and you say, oh no, there's a bad sign. It could be also the Friday the 13th. Maybe that also connects to the assigning times, right? The whole Christian idea of the Friday the 13th being a bad day. But here it's omens, it's chance events. In Hebrew, this is called menachish. Someone who does guesswork. Menachish. Nachash. It's not nachash the snake, it's nachash, guesswork, or nichush, and menachish. Now, what is going on here? What do we get from connecting this to Tiferet? So Tiferet, if you know a little bit about the way all these sephirot are built and what they mean, Tiferet is the source of self-consciousness. Above Tiferet, we're not so self-conscious of ourselves, and below Tiferet, we're very self-conscious of ourselves, because the lower sephirot have to do with our desires. That's where we feel ourselves the most. Since Tiferet is the beginning of self-consciousness, it's also the place where self-consciousness can go awry. We can be overly self-conscious. And if you're overly self-conscious, it means you feel yourself all the time. You feel this and you feel that and you feel everything. That's how people become hypochondriac, they're overly self-conscious. So how do you call someone who senses, who feels himself? It's called chash, which is there in the word nichush, menachesh. And here the idea is that when you see everything as a sign, you saw something here and there, and you say, oh, this is a message from the universe, this is another message from the universe. This is over self-consciousness. You think the world is revolving around yourself. And you're not going simply with a simple, wholehearted faith that everything is for the best, everything is from God. Obviously, there's no chance, but it doesn't mean that everything is a message for me. It's a big, big world, and there's no coincidence, but it doesn't mean that everything is a message for me. I just take it as a matter of faith that everything good that happens, I say thank you. And everything bad that happens, we also have a blessing for that. We bless God whether it's good or bad, not the same blessing, but there's a blessing for everything. Because we just say it's all coming from Hashem. I don't have to overthink it and overinterpret it. If you start overthinking, overinterpreting, if you had this event and that event, or that dream, or that feeling, you're too much self-absorbed. Just, say, Baruch Hashem, or if it was something bad, you say it's for the best. I hope we understand soon enough why it happened. And if not, we always have belief to fall back on. And go on with your life, and go on with the good things you want to give to the world. Don't stop and start overanalyzing everything that is going on in your life and thinking that it's all like a message or a sign that you need to interpret, right? This is the menachish. Now, the very next one, witchcraft, mechashef. Rashi doesn't say anything. And even the Rambam just says it's wrong. Why? It doesn't require any explanation. Witchcraft or sorcery is actual interference by supernatural means with the way the world is. The Chazal, and even to a degree, the Rambam, who's very much a rationalist, they believe that witchcraft exists. Meaning someone can actually do some miracles and do things that are supernatural. Don't be impressed by it. It doesn't make it good. It just means that they have this power that they're using, but the power is coming from what we call the sitra achra, the other side, the side of the klipa. So the very fact that you're told of someone who has disabilities, and they can know where you are, and they can make things move, or they have supernatural powers, you shouldn't be impressed by it at all. There's people like this in every nation. The worst people in the world can be like this. They have this power. They're stealing it in a way from the other side, from the sitra achra. The only thing that matters is, are they tzaddikim? Are they really righteous? Do they have true faith in God and be God-serving and God-fearing? And then the miracles will be a side issue. It'll be something that surrounds them because it's a side effect almost of their devotion to Hashem. But witchcraft, that you're actually going and doing things, doesn't require explanation. I will put one source here, which is a beautiful source from Sanhedrin, which looks at the word mechashef. So witchcraft, or someone who does witchcraft, which in Hebrew is mechashef, it says he denies the hosts of heavens. This is a word play. In Hebrew, to deny the hosts of heaven is makhish pamalia shel mala. Mala is above. Makhish is denies. Pamalia is the hosts, like the angels. Basically, the real supernatural powers. God is operating in the world through his angels, through his different hosts of powers. And here, the word mechashef, if you break it up, it alludes to makhish pamalia. Mechashef, the F is like the P of pamalia. Mechashef is like the sound of the word alludes or hints at this expression makhish pamalia shel mala, and that's the real problem. Is that by taking control of the powers of nature and manipulating nature, they're pushing away the divine power in a way, or they're making it seem as if it's not God running the world, it's us running the world. We, the sorcerers, the witches, the wizards, we're running the world. It should be noted something beautiful. This is a wonderful thing that comes from having this structure in front of us. Witchcraft is now positioned just above the sleight of hand, the illusion. And the whole idea is that they're really connected, right? There are 3 or 4 sephirot apart, but once you place them on this model, you all of a sudden see that they're one on top of the other. And this is referred to in the mefarshim, in the interpreters. They say witchcraft is worse. It's punishable by death. It's called machashefa lo techayeh. Illusionists are pretending to be wizards and witches, but they're not. So it's very similar. It's like a weaker version of witchcraft. That's why it's straight below it. So a beautiful little thing, and that's not a severe. It's not a severe a transgression. It's not as severely punished because it's not really witchcraft. It's just pretending to have supernatural power. So witchcraft corresponds to gevura. Gevura is might. This is the might, the forcefulness in which we manipulate nature and change nature. What is today's witchcraft? Today's witchcraft is technology. Now, of course, we're not going to say that technology is forbidden or bad, because it isn't real witchcraft. It's just very similar. There's a famous saying by science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke, and he said that sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic. That's what he said. So once you get to really, really advanced technology, it's going to appear like witchcraft, like magic. So again, it's not actual magic or witchcraft. That's why technology is not an inherently bad thing. We are using technology right now to have this class. But we can learn something from this. Once technology goes into the very fabric of being and starts changing very, very fundamental things. I'm talking, for example, about genetic engineering. Not the kind of genetic engineering to heal an illness or to, get rid of a bad gene. I'm talking about designing human beings, things that are discussed now. I'm talking about deciding what the gender is, which can create a whole kind of chaos. I'm talking about the idea of people maybe cloning themselves in order to have extra organs. The more we go into the basic laws of nature, this is called leshanot sidrei bereshit, to change the very fabric of Genesis, of the creation of the world. This is borderline witchcraft. It's not just using technology to fly and drive and communicate online and so on. I'm talking about the possibilities that are very much in the horizon of interfering so radically with nature so that we change nature on a very, very fundamental level. And this is something very risky. Last year, there was a big movie in the world. Everyone talked about it. It was Oppenheimer. And the whole topic of the movie was that Oppenheimer, the inventor of the atom bomb, it turns out that when they did the actual Trinity experiment, which is the first atomic bomb in the world, in New Mexico, there was a certain fear, very small, there was a certain fear that that one atomic bomb would ignite the entire atmosphere and basically destroy everyone, just one atom bomb. They were afraid that there was a theoretical chance of that happening. This is an example of the kind of power that we are receiving as human beings with our technology that is liable and is getting us to a point in which we may be able to interfere so radically with the genetic makeup, with the physical nature of the world, that we need to be very, very careful about this. We have, bioethical committees thinking about this, and people who are into the moral nature of the dilemmas that science and technology are bringing to the world, and they're thinking about it. Here we are basically saying you need to also have faith in God, belief that there is a creator. The creator knows what he's doing, and he gave us technology. He wants us to use it, but he also wants us to steer clear of anything resembling what was once called witchcraft, which is changing the very fabric of the world, pushing God away, and becoming godlike, right? The whole idea that we are God, we are the creator of the world. This is the technological challenge or danger of our generation. Okay, the next one is the charmer. What is the charmer? The charmer is one who charms snakes or scorpions or other creatures into one spot. And here, this is chover chever. It comes from the word chibur, which is connection, or chaverut, which is friendship. It's all about taking a negative animal, a dangerous animal like a snake or a scorpion, and like hypnotizing it. This is like the famous image of the snake hypnotizer who plays the flute and the snake is sort of dancing, right? This classical image of the animal hypnotist. This is what should be at the center of this kind of act. Basically, this is talking about it's ruining the element of chesed. Chesed is true love between people, and if you start befriending animals and dangerous animals, and imagining that these animals are your friends, this is a dangerous thing to do. This is one of those practices that the Torah is forbidding. Where do we see this in our generation? So we talked before about horror movies. If you talk about what you see in the Western culture today, is this fascination with monsters and the grotesque. And you can even see, for example, a prime example of this is Halloween. Jews, we have Purim. Purim is you dress up. But there's a big difference between Purim and Halloween. Purim, we dress up as Queen Esther and as the great priest and as whatever you want. But Halloween is very much, in particular, is being dressed up as ghosts and goblins and demons and monsters. And it's very much at the center. That's why you have those pumpkins that are cut up, carved to look like demons, and all this. And you should know, this is something very sad, but here in Israel, when I grew up, Halloween we saw it in the movies, it was this American holiday. Unfortunately, in Tel Aviv, many other places, Halloween has become noticeable. Come the end of October, you see Halloween in the streets because kids are growing up on these movies and they want to be Americanized. And Halloween has become, Christmas and Halloween have entered Israeli secular culture. And it goes along with the fascination with monsters and having the images of those monsters. And they, of course, they come into you, they enter your dreams, and they defile something, they destroy something, and the purity, the sincerity of the soul. So the whole idea of like vampires, and then you have movies about good vampires. All this is gradually befriending the demonic and the beastly and so on. This is one of those things that we are saying, especially for children, or we're starting with the children, this is a negative influence. It's something we don't want to be flirting with the monstrous and with the beastly and so on. Now we have the next three elements that are going together. So Binah is Shoel Ov. This is the same word that was used in the story of King Saul, Shaul HaMelech, when he went to the medium who made the spirit of Shmuel, Samuel, rise from the dead. This corresponds to Binah. The Dat is called Yid'oni, and the Doresh El HaMetim, here we call it necromancer, that goes with the Chokhmah. What does Rashi say about them? He says the spiritist is a kind of sorcery brought about by a pitom. Pitom is the modern Hebrew word for a ventriloquist. This is something very similar. Maybe it is a ventriloquist. Someone who speaks out of his armpit, right? He says armpit, could be the belly, could be something, a place that's hidden, and he makes it appear as if some ghost is coming. Of course, we also know that, like in the story of Shaul HaMelech, King Saul, there was an actual Ma'ala Ba'ov, this woman who brought about the soul. So it'd be like a seance. Someone who uses a seance to summon a spirit. And then the Yid'oni, the medium, is one who puts a bone of an animal, a particular animal called Yiddu'a, which comes from the same root, in his mouth, and then the bone speaks by way of sorcery. So it's another way to channel the dead. And finally, the necromancer, Doresh El HaMetim, Rashi talks about raising a corpse and consulting a skull, and Maimonides goes into further details. He says this: someone who goes to sleep in a cemetery next to a tomb in order for the dead that's buried there to be revealed to him in a dream so he can ask him questions. Right? This is the necromancer, Doresh El HaMetim. He wants to speak to the dead, and so he goes to sleep in the cemetery. All three go together, and coming off the Halloween element and the infatuation with the ghosts and the skeletons and the skulls and all this, we see very much that this is alive in our culture today. This fascination with the Gothic imagery of the monstrous and so on. All this is taking away from a very simple, light-filled connection with life. You know, Jews, we say l'chaim, we say wholeheartedly l'chaim, we choose life. We don't want to converse with the dead. We don't want to raise the dead. It's possible that the story of Shaul shows that it's possible that you can do a seance, or maybe you could once. But the idea is that even Shmuel says that you're bothering me, you're forcing me out of my realm of being. I'm not supposed to be in this world. I'm supposed to be in another world. If you have just a dream, and your ancestor comes to you in a dream, that could be a wonderful gift. And we do believe that our ancestors are still looking after us from beyond. But you don't have to actively go and seek it. And we need to be focused on life, on this world. And then, of course, we get to the ketel, the crown, the superconscious, and being tamim with God. And here we have one of the most beautiful, beautiful Rashi phrases in all of the Torah. He says, walk before him, hitalech lefanav betmimut. So it could be wholeheartedly, or earnestly, or sincerely, or innocently. And he says, put your hope in him, only in him. And do not attempt to investigate the future. You don't need to investigate the future. You don't need this. This is summing up the whole thing. But whatever it may be that comes upon you, accept it, betmimut, wholeheartedly, once again. And then you shall be with him, constantly with God, present in your life, and become his portion, lo ulechelko, your portion, and the divine portion within you, what is called chelek eloka mimal mamash, the divine portion within the soul is awakened, and that becomes like the street light that shines light into your entire life. And like we said before, the whole thing can filter and seep into all the powers of the soul, so that you get rid of the desire, the attraction, the inclination to go and apply one of these practices and to get all this information. You don't need to be in control. You don't need witchcraft. You don't need answers from beyond. You don't need a soothsayer. You don't need a fortune teller. All these people are just chipping away at your simple, pure emunah, tmima, right? The wholehearted faith. So this is just going over the list and trying to understand it and see a little bit of what we get from the correspondence to the sephirot. Now we have the final and fourth question. What is the rectified version of each of these practices? So we're moving this to the side a little bit, and now we're going to see how they work. And this time we're going to go in the opposite direction. We're going to go sliding down. We're going to go from the top one, which was the last one in the verse, the necromancer, which corresponds to Chokhmah. And we're going to go all the way down. This class is quite long as it is, so I'm going to do it rather quickly. But this is to show you that each one of these elements, and I'm sure some of you felt this as I was speaking, some of the things that I was describing, I'm sure some of you were thinking, wait, but we as Jews, observant Jews, and God-fearing Jews, we have a little bit of that, don't we? Yes, we do. Because we have this principle which says, Zelu madzeh asa Elokim. Everything in the negative world has a counterpart in the positive world. In fact, there's a midrash, beautiful midrash, in which God says, Kol ma she'asarti lecha, hetarti lecha. Everything that I forbade you, I also allowed you in a refined version. The classic example is that, of course, we're forbidden from eating pork. Pork is a very gross, very filthy, defiled animal and flesh. But God created a certain fish which has the flavor of pork, and the fish is much more refined and much more subtle. But if you eat it, you get the taste. God doesn't want us to suffer, and God doesn't want us not to have experiences. He just wants us to have those experiences in a refined way, in a subtle way. He doesn't want us to wallow in this world and to be lost and drowning in the world. He wants us to float and to rise above the world while still being connected to the world. And he wants us to taste all the flavors, and everything that he forbids on a macro level or on a gross level, he allows on a refined level. So we're going to see a beautiful example of this right now. So now we're gonna go back from the top down and count them again and look at the refined version. We're starting with the necromancer, which is explicitly addressed in the book of Zohar. In the book of Zohar, the question rises whether what we call hishtatchut al kivrei tzadikim, prostrating ourselves at the graves of tzadikim, going to the ohel of the Rebbe to visit his resting place and daven, going to the Baal Shem Tov in Mezhibuzh where he's buried and davening there, praying there, going to Hadich where the Alter Rebbe is buried, going to Uman where Rabbi Nachman of Breslov is buried. Hundreds of thousands, millions of Hasidim all over the world throughout history have gone and are still going and are right now all over the world, all over the land of Israel. There's a lot of tzaddikim tombstones here, all the Tanaim. They go there and they daven, they pray to God, and they ask for the tzaddik that's buried there to pray on their behalf and to help their prayers go up. And there's a power there, there's a sgula there. And the Zohar says, hang on, isn't this doresh el hametim? Isn't this inquiring from the dead? Isn't this a bit like the guy who goes to sleep in a cemetery? And then the Zohar replies, no, it isn't. Because we know that the tzaddikim are not really dead. It is said of the tzaddikim, even, it says, I'll say this full phrase, that the reshaim, the wicked, even when they're alive, they're dead. And the tzaddikim, even when they're dead, they're alive. Because they live the life of the soul, and the soul is eternal. And so they're not dead. Their body is dead, but we don't care about their body. We're going there because there's a residue of the soul within the body, within the resting place. And we use that place in order to connect to their soul, and they're called alive. So the Zohar addressed this criticism or this potential problem in which they said, could it be that, and there are some Jews, the more rationalist types, they don't like this. They say, what are you going to the cemetery? You have one. They don't like the idea of a Rebbe at all. Why should you have a Rebbe? You should only be connected to God and pray to God. But the greatest Hasidim and the greatest Rebbes in Chassidut and all the Jews throughout the world, throughout history, simple, God-fearing, good Jews, went to the grave sites of their tzaddikim. And in fact, it's not just that. We all go to the grave sites of our ancestors, of our fathers and our mothers and our grandparents. And we daven and we ask them to help. And that's a good thing because isn't some fascination with the morbid, afterlife and with the skulls and with the dead. And we're not looking for information. We're not digging them up. We're not summoning them. We're just saying their souls can pray on our behalf and we can connect to them on a higher way. So this is the refined, rectified version or the rectification of the necromancer, so to speak, or the doresh el hametim, is going to the graves of tzaddikim. Just like when we started, the hook was the molech and malchut. Here, the hook is that this is the most explicit place in a central source, the Zohar, that addresses the apparent similarity between ishtatchut al kivrei tzaddikim, prostrating on the tomb sites of tzaddikim, and doresh el hametim. It's addressed and it's pushed away, and if you have a sense of kedusha, it's very simple for you. The next is the spiritist. The spiritist in Hebrew is called shoel ov, someone who asks questions of the dead. This is why Shaul HaMelech summoned Shmuel, right? Saul summoned Samuel in order to ask him if he's going to win the war the next day. And seances are all about summoning the dead in order to ask them questions. What is the rectified version of this? The rectified version of this, before that we have the Idoni, I forgot, the order, is that after Chochmah comes, after the necromancer comes, the Idoni, the medium. So, what is the rectified version of this? The medium who uses the bone of the animal in order to communicate with the dead. Da'at is synonymous with the concept of Ruach HaKodesh. A Rebbe, a Tzaddik, having some Ruach HaKodesh is not communicating with the dead, but he is able to give you real answers, good answers. It's intuitive for him. Ruach HaKodesh is not prophecy. He's saying what comes to his mind, what he thinks is the best answer, but it's aligned with something above. There's some inner knowledge connection, connecting his consciousness with a higher consciousness. And in a way, this could be a refined version, the belief that a tzaddik is Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, that he's able to give answers. This is like a rectified counterpart to the Yid Oni, because it has to do with that, which is the sphere of knowledge and Ruach HaKodesh. Now, like I said before, so what is the equivalent of the Shoel Ba'ov, that you want to present a question to the dead? What do we do if we have a Rebbe and the Rebbe passed away and we have a question to ask? So not everyone does it, and if you do it too much, you can become addicted. But there's a very holy custom, many people do it. And they take a book written by that tzaddik, and they open it up randomly, and they put a note, they put a question, and then they trust the hashgacha pratit, and the spirit of the Rebbe and the spirit of Hashem to guide the question, opening up the page to give you an answer. And of course, all Chabadnikim and people who are affiliated with Chabad do this with Igrot HaKodesh. Igrot HaKodesh is the book of the series, massive series of books that are all the answers that the Rebbe gave to the thousands and thousands of people who asked him questions. And because it's massive and random, then if you go to one of them, you open it up randomly, and you trust the Hashgacha Pratit, you put in a question, people see this every day, you get answers that apply to your question. And people have been doing this for generations with other books. And they open up a book, they open a verse to find an answer for something. This is a bit like Shoel Ov, right? Asking deceased tzaddikim questions through books. In our generation, it's mostly, like I said, done with the Igrot HaKodesh of the Rebbe. This was, by the way, the question that sparked the whole class. The question began, someone wrote to me, she said, oh no, I saw this class by this Rav. The Rav must, some sort of misnagid, what we call those who don't like Chassidut, or they like general Chassidut, but they don't like Chabad, which is the telling sign of someone who is not really into Chassidut. And he said, don't write letters to dead Rebbes. You don't want to talk to dead Rebbes. And he said, this is Doresh El HaMetim, this is Shoel Ba'ov. And he said it was very frightening. He said, like, you're doing a transgression from the Torah, like a horrible transgression, you're doing it. And I was so angry at this that I said that this is a good chance to do something that I've been dreaming of for years, which is to find the rectified version of each one of these elements, right? And then I discovered the Zohar about the Doresh El HaMetim, which is even more extreme than writing letters, right? And the Zohar addressed this. Going to the gravesite is much worse than writing the letter, because you're actually in that even more similar to the Doresh El HaMetim, and that was refined, and that was seen as okay, and the same goes here. The Shoel Ba'ov is like asking a she'elah, a question from a deceased Rebbe through the books. And again, if you don't make too much of it, and if you don't start building your whole life around it, and the approach that I received from my own Rav Ginsburg is he does not oppose this, but he says this many times, that what the best thing is, just like there's how do you call it? Ezra Rishona, first aid, right? First aid is you're wounded, you need something quick. But there's also preventive medicine. He said you want the preventive medicine. It's not opening the Igrot HaKodesh when you have a problem and you're looking for an answer. It's just take a volume of Igrot HaKodesh and just read it. And you see all the answers, the different answers that the Rebbe is giving all the people. And the more you read them, the more you sort of connect to the consciousness, to the mind, to the approach of the Rebbe. And then you can ask yourself, what would the Rebbe have said about this and that? And you get the answer. You don't need to open a particular book in a random way. So it's just a fun pastime, opening up Igrot HaKodesh, reading all these answers, and then you connect to it in a kind of preventive medicine, right? And you connect so much to these answers, then you have the eyes of the Rebbe, and you can look at the world through the eyes of the Rebbe. And you don't need to run to, every time you have a problem or a question, to one of those books, which again is also fine. Again, as long as you don't become addicted. If you become every decision, every day, you open the book of the Rebbe, you have a problem, my friend, right? But if every once in a while, in this really special, crossroads in life, you do it, it's many, many, many very holy kosher Jews have been doing it for so long, saying that it's horrible and it's an avera from the Torah, it's just a really, unpretty thing to do. It's like making all those wonderful, kosher Jews all of a sudden be ovrei avera. So I didn't like that at all. And in a way, this whole class is a reply to that Rav. I hope he sees this class. I don't know. Okay. Chesed, the charmer, is about hypnotizing animals. What is the holy version of this? Well, we have many, many stories, starting with King Solomon, and continuing with many, many tzaddikim, that they were able to know the language of birds and animals. They didn't use it to charm them or to manipulate them or to make scorpions and snakes become positive or to befriend all those, negative animals. But they could understand them. They could listen and hear and understand them because they had this mystical knowledge, the way of hearing how the world is whispering and murmuring and talking, and they were able to know it. And very good, very holy people were able to do this. By the way, there are many stories in Chassidut of people who had this ability and other abilities, like knowing your past lives and like knowing what's going on afar. And they prayed to God that he would take away that ability, that he would take away that power, because they want to serve him betmimut, with sincere, simple wholeheartedness. He said, it's too much noise. I don't want to know what the birds are saying. I don't want to know what the animals are saying. I know you gave me this gift, but please take it away. I just want to serve you. It's a bit like the Alter Rebbe famously saying, I don't want your afterlife and I don't want your paradise. I just want you. I know you're promising me all these things, but I don't care. I want just you. I want the connection with you. And this is the tamim with God that's here at the top. And that's the central thing. But on the other hand, holy Jews, holy tzaddikim had this ability. It's a bit close to charming the animals, and that's a refined, rectified version of it. Now, the witchcraft. So witchcraft is absolutely asur, it's forbidden, it's in fact, like we said, it's a capital punishment. On the other hand, we had many, many great tzaddikim, tons of stories. Anyone who learns Chassidut reads dozens, hundreds of these stories. Many, many tzaddikim would do moiftim. Moiftim are kind of miracle working. They would do things, the Baal Shem Tov, all the time. He would make it, once he took a carriage with someone who wasn't connected to Chassidut, and he showed him, you want to see what a Rebbe is? A Rebbe can make it rain only on one side of the carriage. It started raining on one side. And then he said, and then he can make it, he can wave his handkerchief and it would rain only on the other side of the carriage. And it did. And then he can make it stop and make it go back. And he did all this in a playful way in order to get him to be connected to Chassidut, to the inner dimension of the Torah. So Rebbes and tzaddikim would do moiftim all the time. And now it's true that the more popular versions of Chassidut are overly obsessed with the moiftim, right? They deal with them too much, and then they think that's the main thing. And that's, edging towards something like loving or believing in witchcraft. It's not there because the tzaddikim would do it very offhandedly. It wasn't the main thing. But the fact that it happened, and there were moiftim, it's a subtle, rectified, holy version of witchcraft. It's not witchcraft, it's not sorcery, but it's a bit like that. But it's coming from a tamim place. The general rule is that all these positive systems, right, writing the Igrot HaKodesh and going to the tzaddikim and believing in the Ruach HaKodesh and all this, the whole idea is that it doesn't come at the expense of tmimut. It's a branch of tmimut. It's all done with tmimut. That's the whole point. That's the big difference. That's what makes it kosher and positive. That's what changes the whole picture, is that instead of hiding God, instead of pretending we are in control or the force that I'm able to tap into, it's saying, I am so tamim, I believe God is everywhere. I'm so tamim, I can also go to the tombstone of a tzaddik and pray. The Rebbe is so tamim, he just, the moifet, the miracle sort of comes naturally to him. It just happens. Or he plays with it. It's not the main thing. It's a part of his tmimut instead of being at the expense of his tmimut. Instead of chipping away, taking away from the tmimut, he's so tamim that he can do a moifet, and he's not afraid that it'll be witchcraft. And he knows that all these Hasidim will know it's not witchcraft. Right? So this is the rectification of the Gvura one, the witchcrafts. When we get to Hod, you'll see something very beautiful about this. Now, Tiferet interpreting omens. So the interpreting omens was if you see the black cat, or you see the fox, or you see the deer, or you see a color, you see a number, and you say this must be a sign, right? And this is off, you're being overly self-conscious, you think the world is revolving around you, and you're over-interpreting. But there is a very, very holy, basic, and tamim version of this, which is just attention to divine providence, to Hashgacha Pratit. Pay attention to it. Hashgacha Pratit is observing details. If you observe the details of your life and you notice that everything is coming from Hashem, you're grateful for everything, and you believe nothing is by chance, and you're enjoying the fact that you just learned something, and then you go and talk to someone and he asks you about the exact same topic you just learned, you're enjoying this, you're appreciating this, the more you notice the details, the more the fact that God is noticing, watching over the details becomes apparent to you. And it's all about attention and being open-eyed and open-eared and listening to the world. It's not about me. It's not messages to me. It's the music of the world. There's Hashgacha Pratit, there's divine providence. This is the year now ending. Tafshin Pei Hei is the Shnat Hashgacha Pratit. It should be a year of Hashgacha Pratit. So it's a good last chance to really talk about this so important topic. In many ways, Chassidut is all about being aware of Hashgacha Pratit. So this is Tiferet, and it's the opposite of overly self-conscious. Instead of focusing on myself, I'm focusing on nature, the world, what's going on, and I see the cosmic orchestra, playing with the conductor, which is Hashem, guiding everything, and it's all Him. But I'm enjoying the rhyme and reason and the coincidences, which are not really coincidences, that is listening. So this is the rectified Tiferet. I'm coming out of myself, listening to the symphony of the world, and appreciating the Hashgacha Pratit. Assigning times. This is very famous. The Gemara says something which is absolutely like assigning times, but it doesn't take away from the Tmimut. The Torah says that Av has bad luck, the month of Av, right, previous month. The month of Menachem Av has bad luck, and one should avoid going to court. And on the other hand, Adar has a strong positive luck or mazal. The expression is that Av ri'a mazlei, he has bad mazal, and Adar bari mazlei, he has strong, healthy, good mazal. And the Rebbe famously said this about everyone's birthday. He said one's birthday is your mazal is gover, your spiritual power is gover, and it becomes an auspicious time for making decisions and doing good deeds. So the whole idea that there are auspicious times, or the opposite, is something that very much exists in Judaism. Whenever there's a holiday, whenever there's a fast day, these are called auspicious times. Why is it different from me'onen, one who assigns times? Because the me'onen is basing it on astrology, on just nature. Here, when we talk about Adar and Av, we're not talking about the astrological sign or about something natural. We're talking about something that every month, every season has a certain quality to it, a property to it that is divine, that we have noticed over history. We noticed that so many of our tragedies took place on Av, and we noticed that so many miracles are taking place on Adar, and we're just noticing this, and we're seeing that time has a shape, time has a form, and the different times are not. It's not a flat line. There's hills and troughs, and it curves. The time is like a wave. The timeline is like a wave, and it shifts and it changes. And it's okay to be aware of the times and aware of the different moments. That there's times that are mesugalim. They have certain segula. Right? Listening to that, it's just like listening to creation, listening to Hashgacha Pratit. It's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing once you make a whole system which puts God out of the picture and ascribes to the star signs something that not only tells you something about the property of the time or the quality of the time, but tells you is prescriptive. Right? It tells you this, you do this, you don't do that, and it's disconnected from God. What we have about Adar and Av and other similar occasions, is that this is part of the fabric of Jewish life, part of the fabric of getting a feel for the calendar, and so on. And so this is the rectification of the me'onen in the sense of assigning times. Now, what about the illusionist? The illusionist, the sleight of hand magician who pretends to make something that's not real, and it appears as if it's real. So this is something very beautiful. Remember that it's no coincidence that witchcraft and illusionism is on one axis, one above the other, right? We said that basically the magician pretends to be like a witch or a wizard, right? It's like a lighter version, a softer version. So here there's also a connection. There are many, many stories about tzaddikim who would hide their power. And they would do it in some very beautiful ways. One way is they would make people forget the fact that they saw them doing a miracle. They didn't want people walking around and telling this Rebbe Nachman, he does miracles. So they would do like a moifet, and then they would do another little moifet, which is making the person forget he saw the moifet so that he wouldn't go around telling. Or they would hide and pretend to be regular people. They didn't want people to go and go, oh, this is this Rebbe, he has these powers. No, they wanted to be simple Jews. So they would hide the fact. They would cast a set of illusion, naturally or supernaturally in some ways, to make it appear as if they didn't have it. And there's another thing I have to mention here. I talked about up here, right, about the moiftim and the miracles. There's a famous line from the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe studied in the Bet Midrash, the house of study of the Maggid of Mezrich. Right? Maggid of Mezrich is student of the Baal Shem Tov, second generation Hassidic Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe was his student, third generation Hassidic Rebbe. And he said that when he was young and he went to the study house of the Maggid, he said the following. He says, the moiftim, the miracles, there were so many of them, they were lying around the floor and nobody bothered to pick them up. It's a famous phrase by the Alter Rebbe. He said there were so many of them. Every day, every moment, you had the moifet, you have incredible, supernatural, unbelievable things going on. Nobody cared. It was lying on the floor. There were so many of them. It fell on the floor, and nobody would even bother to pick them up. It was under the tables. Why? Because we were all focused on the Torah, on the spirit, on the inner work. That was the main thing. There was also this element of the miracles, but who cared about them? So I think it's beautiful when you think about the moiftim up in your gvura falling down at the feet, right? Because hod and netzach are the legs, and chesed and gvura are the arms. So it's like you hold it, but then it falls off your hands. You don't care about it because you're listening to the Rebbe speak. So it falls to the floor and you ignore it. You don't see it. It's like an achizat enaim. You become blind to it, right? You don't even bother picking it up. You don't care about it. So in a way, the ignoring of the miracles becomes a rectified version of the illusionism or the hiding of something, a very, very refined way. Just don't look at it. Don't care about the miracles. And like I said, also there was the Rebbes that actually made people forget about their own miracle working. Divination is much, much earlier and more foundational, right? This is the sphere of foundation, much more foundational than Chassidut. The Torah has, on several occasions, talks about doing a goral. A goral is like a lottery. This is Torah prescribed lottery, the goral. One of the things I didn't say about divination is like you're holding like a pendulum and you make the pendulum decide for you. It's like holding the stick and making the stick go this way or the other way. And this is a form of channeling. You're trying to channel some energy and receive answers from that. That's not a tamim, simple way to go about observing the body and the world and getting a feel for the energies and the health and illness of the world. So, but in a way, there is a kind of divinely ordained, prescribed lottery, which is the goral, the division of the land of Israel into the different plots of land, that each tribe got a land, was done al-pi ha-goral. There was the goral, and it chose. And the same way, the 70 old wise men were chosen out of the 72. 2 had to be pushed away because you had 12 tribes, and you took 6 out of each. We had 72, but there was only 70. We used goral. And of course, every Yom Kippur, there was a goral of which goat goes to be sacrificed and which goes to the Azazel, goes to be into the desert. So there are goralot, which is a way of channeling God's will through a kind of lottery, a kind of goral. You do it, and that's how you let Hashem decide. There's also actually more than that. It's also the Urim and Tumim and the letters of the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol that would shine the different letters, and you had to connect them to put them together. It also connects to the omens, because the interpreting omens is called Nachash, and Nachash is permutation of the letters of Choshen. Choshen is the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. There's a little bit of guesswork that goes into reading the letters, because they appear, and you have to find out what the order is, whether it's even the words itself, Choshen or Nachash, right? Guesswork or interpretation of omens and or divination and Choshen. It's the same letters, the same you would get with the letters of the Choshen. They would give you a message, but you would have to, it was an anagram. You have to turn it into the thing. So this connects both divination and interpreting omens that are again on the same axis. All this has to do with Torah prescribed lottery or goralot. And we got now to the final practice, which is the one we started with. The final one of that horrible initiation rite of passing the child through fire. Does that, even that, has a holy version? The answer is yes. Every Jewish child learns about Abraham being thrown into the oven of fire by Nimrod. And we learned from this, and the Baal Shem Tov talked about this, that when the children should be educated to what we call Mesirut Nefesh. Mesirut Nefesh is the willingness to give it their all, give their soul, give their life to God. You hear stories about Jews who masru et hanefesh sheleim, they sacrificed their own lives for the sake of holiness, for the sake of truth. And the Baal Shem Tov even said that when you say Shema Yisrael, you should imagine that if you was so needed, you would jump into the fire in order to sanctify God's name. That if it came to that, if there was persecution and you were told you should bow down to an idol or you should do one of the other main capital, transgressions, you should not do that, and you should be willing to cast yourself into the fire and give your life. And there are many stories about many Jews who, because they had that childhood memory of being taught that they were Jews and they need to say Shema Yisrael and not bow down and be even willing to be sacrificed themselves, then Jews who distanced themselves all the way from Judaism. But when the moment came in the Holocaust and in the pogroms, they would all of a sudden come out and say Shema Yisrael, and they would sort of cast themselves into the fire. This was all based on this very foundational education that the Jewish faith is something that is the most foundational. This is the connection between Keter and Malchut. They are the most far apart, but they're very, very profoundly connected. It's called Na'ut Sofan B'tchilatan V'tchilatan B'Sofan. The end is wedged in the beginning, and the beginning is wedged in the end. They're intimately connected, and the tmimut, in a way, of saying, all I have is God, and this is my truest essence, and I'm not going to give that up, is a kind of willingness to be, if so demanded, to be cast into the fire. Love Hashem, your God, with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your might, all of your soul, even if He takes away your soul. And this is the ability to say Shema Yisrael. It comes from the childish imagination or inner practice of I'm willing, like Avraham Avinu, like Abraham, to cast myself into the fire. And educating children to Mesirut Nefesh is something very profound, very Jewish, very basic to our story, to our identity. That is, in a way, a subtly refined way, a rectification of the Molech cult. And thus concludes our very, very intense and rich and multi-layered class. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to put it on YouTube For those watching on YouTube, feel free to leave your comments. I would love to hear what you have to say about what you think about this, any thoughts that came to mind, what it reminded you of. And I was waiting to give this class for many years, actually, to finally put it on YouTube in English, and now it's here, and I'm very happy. And now, this Shabbat, when you're going to listen to the Parashat of Shoftim, and you're going to hear these verses, you'll be able to know that you really went very deep down into those verses, and you were able to appreciate just the beautiful inner structure behind them. And you can understand them, you can understand how they're present in our own lives today, and also that everything God forbade, He also allowed. He created very subtle, holy, refined versions that we can connect to and thus elevate the spark that's hidden in those very idolatrous ancient practices. Hi everyone, if you enjoyed this episode, please press like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. If you want more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much, and see you in the next episode.